Hey guys, this here is Getaway Driver 101, and today I'm going to be giving you an explanation on how to upscale on Windows and how to do it properly. And I'm not only going to be explaining upscaling, I'm going to be explaining how to make it more comfortable to your eyes and get better graphics. Now, just note to self, make sure you have a benchmark tool like Heaven Benchmark, or go and get any other benchmark tool that's out there. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So what you're going to do first is you're going to benchmark and get your lowest, your middle, and your highest. Now just note to self, my wattage is about to go up here in just a second because this benchmark tool is kind of aggressive. But you're going to launch your benchmark. You're going to get your lowest and your average. And the reason why you want to get your lowest, like my lowest right now is 109, and it usually starts you out on 9. So once you have your lowest, your middle, and your highest, now you're going to go ahead and start editing your graphics. So we'll start with the basic first before you go further into your graphics engine. Now, the basic that you can do first is in this. You're going to go ahead and go here. You're going to go to your global. You're going to turn RTX dynamic vibrances to on. If you want a maximum frame rate, I suggest doing this because it keeps your graphics card from over-ribbing on games that don't require any usage whatsoever, which will make your computer last longer. It'll make your graphics card not break down as quick, things like that. And then virtual reality sampling, you can either turn that to adaptive or on. If you use virtual reality a lot on your computer, then go ahead and turn it on, always on. But if you're only using it every so often, turn it to adaptive. I plan on getting one soon, so that's how I have mine. So as you can see, it does notice that it can add a value, but not every app is going to do that. So you can adjust these manually. Sorry about that. You can adjust these manually. In doing so, allows you to add more vibrance. Now, what is vibrance? Well, let me show you what vibrance is. So vibrance is going to be in your control panel, and it's going to be over here in desktop color settings. Now, you could do this and just call it a day, because here's a 50-50, 1, 50, 0. Now this here is for if you're colorblind. I don't really recommend messing with this unless you have to. It's one of those things that is not recommended to mess with unless you have to, but it is for if you are colorblind, you can kind of get it to where you can see your colors for you. Which is kind of funny for anybody else that gets on the computer, because they're going to have a very fun day using your computer. So if you do that, just note to self, if anybody else uses the computer, it's going to make it a little bit wonky for them. It'd be perfect for you, but it will be wonky for them, depending on if you're colorblind or not. Now, vibrances is also a part of eye and lighting. This here is for eye strain. If your monitor is over bright or very aggressive for no reason, I recommend turning it up by 1%, or 2%, or 3%, or 4%, however high you want. I don't recommend going over 60, because it will mess with your games, it will mess with your glares, your lighting structures, it will mess with all of that. It is only meant to be turned up in small increments. I do a 52 for me because my monitor is so bright that it will literally blind you when you get flashbanged in a game. So if you get flashbanged, you're going to go blind on this monitor. That's just how this monitor is. But from there, we're going to go here, set use to advanced 3D settings. And then as you do that, you're going to go ahead and go here in this, and you can adjust any game how you like. Now, I don't recommend doing what I've been doing. I'm only doing this because I'm picky. But not every game's gonna look pretty doing this. Only do this for certain games that need lighting adjustment. And that's literally what this does. This is gonna adjust the intensity scale of either how intense or how dark or how kind of like that there. That gives you a good shading difference. How it shades from bright to gray, darker, and then black. You know, that gives you a good aspect. It basically adjusts the shading of the lighting of how it shades around shadows and how it shades around the lights, which is very nice depending on the game, or it can make a game look really wonky. So like Need for Speed, I have an 85-85. What you could do is 50-85, or you could do a 60-70, or a 55-70. You know, there's all kinds of combinations that you can do. So just don't ever think that you can do those combinations. So we're going to go back to here to 3D imaging settings. So go to your 3D imaging. And then from imaging scaling, you have on. Now before you mess with any of these 3D settings, you've already messed with this. I recommend doing a benchmark after you mess with this, before you mess with this. Now if you messed with this, that's fine. That's okay. That's not going to mess with your FPS. What's going to mess with your FPS is these settings here that affect the engines and the AI engines of the games, which will affect how your rendering and your loading works, which will affect everything including your frames. So just note that just go to revert settings, go to each section in the control panel and do it, or you can go to each section of the app and do it, or you can do it to the setting. The way you do that is you click restore. You can do that in any game or functionality, or optimize or restore. You can do all kinds of different things without having to fully restore the whole program. So just note to self, if you don't want to fully restore your program, then you should be fine. Now we're going to move on to 3D imaging settings once you've done your next benchmark. Now, after your benchmark is done, you got image scaling. This here, I recommend setting to 88 for GPU image scaling and sharpening. Then you have astro filtering. Now, most of your games are going to have this. Almost 90% of your games are going to have this on application control. If you have, like, let's say a 4060, a 4070, a 4080, or a 4090, something that's powerful enough to handle everything on Ultra. If your graphics card can't handle everything on Ultra, I recommend doing this at your own risk. If you're doing this at your own risk, benchmark, change one setting, benchmark, change a setting, benchmark, change a setting, benchmark. And the reason why is because if your graphics card is a lower tier, you don't want to blow that graphics card up. 2, you don't want to make the graphics card not run well and make it unusable for you as the user. So you have a restore button here, as well as in each program. You can go to each program individually, including your search engines. For my search engine here, I'm going to modify it and set this to 100. And then I'm going to go down to my search engine down here. Seeing if there's anything else I needed to change. Now, this here doesn't really need maximum performance. It's a search engine. Let's be real about a search engine. And then FPS. I don't really know if I can flip that to off. Let's see what happens if I do. Flip that to off. Max FPS rate off. Now let's say I boot up this. It does boot up a little bit faster. I do give it that. And then that boots up a little bit faster too. So there are things that you can modify here, but I recommend doing anything at your own extent because you, like I said, you don't want to cause your applications to be unstable, but you do want better frames, or better frames won't make your application unstable. Actually makes your application, well, that's not true. Overclocking is technically getting more frames in return for risking stability. So it's two ends of the stick, really. So just make sure that anything you do, that you do it in small increments. You benchmark, small increments, benchmark, and then apply settings. And then once everything is set how you want, everything, I recommend, let's say everything looks great to you, restart the computer. And the reason why is because if everything comes up magnificent, or great, or physically awesome, however you look at it, restart the computer so it gives it more of a, here, this is applied, do this. So then your settings will be more set. So when you do open up games and stuff, then games will run with those applied settings. I will see y'all in just a second. I'm gonna go ahead and boot up. As you can see, it does change how your game is gonna look, and it made the game so much more. I feel like the way it's set now, I have more brightness, but I also have more of a chromey color to a lot of the colors, which I don't have a problem with that. To me, it makes it look more realistic. But what I was having beforehand is it would have a really nice chrome to it, but then the lighting versus the roads would get super bright to where it looked like they weren't even black anymore. And if you're experiencing that, then that means that your graphics card scaling is scaling correctly, but is not scaling correctly. You have it applied in a way where it's working, but it may be either over applying on certain applications, but under applying on others. So that's the whole point in setting certain games up manually, because if you experience that on certain games, you just go in and set those games up manually. Or if you want that game to possibly look even better, subscribe. If there's anything y'all want to learn with how to upscale, go back and rewatch, or go watch other videos. Upscaling is only something that you can do to a certain point. You are going to be limited on any engines, monitor, or dev restrictions. Now, dev restrictions happens from certain game developers where super sampling may not work for that particular game. You can still apply it, but super sampling may not let that game run at its full ability. So just note that if you are experiencing that you should go in and look. Now, I'm going to go put a frame lock on my Need for Speed game, because as you can see, I am doing 200 frames in the top left. But as you can see, my CPU is doing 43. So before I quit or do anything, I'm going to go ahead and show y'all this on how well you can make everything. So as you can see, now it's in the 60s. My computer is now redlining, and that is how I have it set up, where if it gets over a certain rate for too long of a period, it starts getting angry. So I'm going to do a 155 apply, lock it at 155, I'm going to close this down, go back to the game, and see, it's not going to apply straight off the bat. The game's going to. So if you're letting your computer do that, you might want to repaste your thermal paste. If you don't want to do that, then eventually your computer is going to start shutting off. A computer can hit 109 before it shuts off on the C level, but that depends on the motherboard. My motherboard is stated at 109 for. It's stated at 100 C for thermal throttle, and then 125 for emergency shutdown, which I have emergency shutdown at 115. I moved it. You can move it around in the BIOS. So now that I have it at a 155, we're going to go ahead and launch. It's for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 seconds, even a minute, or even 2 minutes. That is fine. But a computer should not sit at 100% for an hour straight. It's not good for it. Now my CPU usage is in the 30s. And now let me pull up MSI Afterburner. Now that MSI Afterburner is pulled up, MSI Afterburner is going to launch on the side for monitoring aspects, because I have it set it that way. Here in just a second, once it detects that the game is running. Just got to play the game for a minute. As you can see, it is now showing the CPU usage, which is now in the 60s and 70s. In the computer, you should always make sure it's not overridden. So something to note, just because you increase your graphics does not mean anything. You can increase your CPU usage by increasing graphical usage. So just note that by increasing super sampling, frame scaling, image scaling, any of those functionalities that you turn on will increase your CPU usage, not by a lot. It could be by 1%, it could be by 2%, it could be by 10%. It could be by absolutely 0.1 of 1%. So just keep that as a note on the side, that if you're image scaling, start frame locking. If you're image scaling on them games, frame lock it. You can set it to whatever frame rate you know the game will run really nice at, and maybe not even dip below. For instance, if you have a game that does 300 frames, 360, lock it to 320. And bring it 40 frames down, or even 20 frames, or even 15 frames down from where it sits at on average. And what you're doing is now you're creating a barrier between it and your graphics card, to where your graphics card isn't going to be running at 100% the entire time. I'm only using 74% on an upscaled game that is running 4K at that. So just keep it in mind that you can make your games run smoother or worse depending on how you're scaling it. Now, this game here is kind of old. It's not the newest game out, but it's a good example to show that you can scale, lock, or shut down some aspects of certain games where you can make the game more user-friendly to not only the user, but friendlier to your computer. And that's what most people forget. Thanks for watching, like or subscribe, and I will see you all next time.